Steve Palazzolo, our good buddy with Pro Football Focus. And you can check it out at pff.com. They have their mock draft there. And Steve, the Pro Football Focus analyst and head of football product, co-host of the Pro Football Focus NFL show, and a friend of this show. Give me the player who's dropping right now, Steve.
Well, everybody's talking about Drake May, the quarterback from UNC. I really thought at the beginning of this draft cycle he was going to be locked in at number 2. But you're talking about Jaden Daniels of LSU maybe being that guy. I think the more people watch, they really love Jaden Daniels, and I think they've been a little disappointed with Drake May, some of his mechanics, missing some of the easy stuff. But I'm still a Drake May fan, so if he does fall, or a team like the Vikings packages those picks to come up and get him at, say, 3 or 4, I think Drake May has a chance to really be a good player. And so I'm a big Drake May fan still. I'm a little surprised that people have soured on him as much as they have during the draft process.
Yeah, but you use the word good. If I'm taking a quarterback in the top 5, I want him to be great.
Yeah, Dan, I don't know how many of those guys exist. There's only a handful. So, it's a challenge, man. I mean, the last few years hitting on quarterbacks, I think it's because that standard, what you're saying, it looks like we miss on quarterbacks more, but it's because we put this standard of they have to be great. They have to be the next $50 million quarterback, and there's only one starter. You don't get time to develop. What Green Bay did with Jordan Love is rare and may have really paid off for them. So, look, I think there's still value in having a good first contract quarterback, but choosing the next superstar, good luck if you could really do that very well going forward.
How many quarterbacks does Pro Football Focus have graded as first-round draft picks?
I think we feel good about the top 3, which is Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May. I think as far as who we expect, I think J.J. McCarthy being there, I see him as more of a fringe first, who I think has been bumped up a little bit this offseason. And then, Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, again, I think is more of those fringe first type of guys. So depends on the view. Obviously, the quarterbacks tend to go higher because of the value of the position. But I think there's 3, those top 3, I think are the surefire, should be in the top 10 type of guys.
This always amazes people when I ask this question because the answer is not always as obvious as you would think. But if I said the best player in the draft is who?
So, yeah, obviously we're taking positional value out of it. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the guy at Ohio State. I think the subtleties to his game as a receiver, the big question is going to be, well, he didn't work out, and we don't know how fast he is. And the guy that he's competing with for the top receiver spot, Malik Neighbors, went out there and tested and looked explosive. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr., just outstanding as a just all-around receiver, body control, route running.
But you're not big on a wide receiver top 5 pick, right?
I'm fine with that top 5. I think receiver is right up there as the most valuable non-QB position in the NFL. Now, they are easier to find in rounds 2 and 3, but I think there's 3 blue chip receivers in this draft. It's Marvin Harrison Jr., it's Malik Neighbors, it's Roma Dunze from Washington. I'd be fine with any of those top 3 receivers going top 5, top 10, because I think the value is absolutely there at the position.
Have teams ever reached out to Pro Football Focus privately asking questions, or could you do research on this, or what do you have on this player?
Yeah, there's been a lot of stories throughout the years. I can't really divulge most of them, but look, every team has PFF data. They all have our data and other data sources, and they all have some level of analytics team or department or football research department that's doing work with our data. And I think that's the interesting thing. When you hear, Dan, when you hear these other analysts say, well, the analytics would say, that there's no such thing, right? It's the same data that's being used a plethora of different ways, right? You change one variable, it changes the outcome. But I'll tell you this, every NFL team is using the data and information to try to make the best decision. They just all sometimes come to different conclusions.
Help me understand what the Broncos are doing at the quarterbacking position.
I can't wait to see what they do, right? You've got the Sean Payton factor. Is he going to be impatient? And the fact that the Broncos are now sitting on the massive dead cap of Russell Wilson. And because of the Sean Payton trade, they don't have a second-round pick. So of all the QB desperate teams, the Broncos are probably in the worst position to go make a move. They're sitting there at 12 overall. They have 5 or 6 teams ahead of them who also need quarterbacks. So I think it's one of the biggest stories of the draft. Will the Broncos mortgage even more of the future? They have to give up future draft capital if they're going to go get a guy, or they're going to sit there at 12, take a non-quarterback and get like a Bo Nix in the second round. So I think it's probably the Bo Nix move. I think it's going to be tough for the Broncos to move up and compete with teams like the Vikings, who just have so much more to offer those top teams.
He's Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus, NFL analyst and head of football product, also co-host of the Pro Football Focus NFL show. I don't know if New England's doing this. If they are, I applaud them, because I don't want to draft a quarterback and not have the infrastructure to help him succeed. They learned from Mac Jones, at least I think they would, that if you draft Drake May or J.J. McCarthy, you're going to go back to what you had before, and that is you don't have a good team around him. It feels like maybe they're going to build a team, and then they're going to try to get their quarterback maybe next year or the year after that. Your thoughts?
I'm usually of the minds that you draft the quarterback, but I think in this situation, you're right. I mean, not only are they completely rebuilding, I think the offensive line needs work. The playmakers absolutely need help. You know, they're in an AFC East where you're trying to compete with the Buffalo Bills, who are still really good, and the Jets, who are going for it these next couple of years, and the Dolphins, who are good. You're not going to put a dent in that, I don't think, in the next year or two. The human dynamic here, though, is the Robert Kraft factor, right? I mean, coming off of 4 losses, basically disappointing seasons post Tom Brady, getting older in age, how much does that, become a factor? But on paper, New England should be a trade down candidate, should be a build the infrastructure first, then get the quarterback type of team. New head coach, new regime, new everything. They should be saying, hey, let's compete in 2025 and 26 instead of just looking to this year. But I don't know how that's going to work with Robert Kraft as the owner.
Also, do we look at the Dolphins' blueprint, and our team's going to try to emulate the blueprint with their wide receivers, with that offense, with what Mike McDaniel is doing?
I mean, it's tough to emulate the fastest team in the league. I do love the speed, though. I think it's been a perfect blend and marriage, though, of Mike McDaniel, who's an outstanding play caller, comes from the Shanahan tree. They're awesome at getting guys into space. And then, hey, let's put the fastest players in the NFL into space. I think the tough thing to replicate is, Tyreek Hill is one of one when it comes to speed. And they did happen to find that, one of the guys that's close in Jalen Waddle. So I think it's tough to replicate. But what I would replicate is loading up at playmaker, at receiver, because I think that's what made Tua take that big step in year 3 of his career. And I think that's how you support your first contract quarterbacks. Goes back to what you said about receiver value. I think receiver value is absolutely massive and through the roof in the NFL, because that's how you make your quarterbacks better.
What teams are bad at drafting?
Oh, man. I mean, look, a lot of people have been fired, so you can't say they're still bad. But, look, a team like the Raiders over the last 10 years has certainly missed on a lot of first-round picks. Remember, they had the Khalil Mack trade, which I thought had a chance to really reset that organization, and they come away with Cleveland Ferrell, who was a bit of a stretch at number 4. They came away with a running back in Josh Jacobs, a safety in Jonathan Abram. So the Raiders have done a poor job, I think, historically with their first-round picks over the last 10 years. Again, we've got a whole new regime there. And I think teams that overall generally just that pick needs more than just literally taking the best players, relative to positional value. There's a few adjustments and tweaks that you would make. But when you go into the draft and you say, I have to have a tackle, I have to have a corner, I have to have a safety, that's when mistakes are made. So I think the teams that really are true to their board, evaluate the players, take the best players, over time, they're going to build the strongest rosters.
More likely to draft a quarterback, the Rams or the Cowboys?
Oh, man, I think the Rams. I'm not sold that the Cowboys are ready to move on from Dak yet, despite all the noise and the fact that they're pushing themselves up against the wall. I think the Rams, just because I think it's in their nature. Les Snead, they drafted a quarterback last year in Stetson Bennett. Les Snead loved Stetson Bennett. I think there's a little bit of an eye to the future for the Rams because Matthew Stafford getting a little bit older, battled so many injuries the last few years. I'll say the Rams more likely, and I still believe the Cowboys will come back to Dak and figure things out going forward.
Best defensive player in the draft is?
Laiatu Latu from UCLA, the edge defender. If he did not have the neck fusion a couple years ago, the injury concerns, the medical retirement at Washington, I think this was clear as day. Latu is one of the best pass rushers we've seen since collecting data on college football since 2014. I think he should be the pick at 8 if Atlanta's going edge rusher over Dallas Turner from Alabama. So if Latu, it's another story I'll be keeping an eye on. If he falls to the mid-teens, or even into the 20s because of the injury. It reminds me of Derwin James a few years ago, fell to 17 to the Chargers, and they got a top 5 player in the draft. that's what a team's getting. Top 5 player in the draft if Latu falls to the teen. So could be a massive steal if the injury does pop up in the first round.
Who did Pro Football Focus have as the number 1 quarterback last year?
I think we had Bryce Young just ahead of C.J. Stroud. I don't think we were different from a lot of other outlets, but yeah, it was Bryce Young, then C.J. Stroud.
No. You're supposed to be different than other, or don't do that. Hey, we weren't the only ones that may have missed on this.
Look, I mean, we were completely different in 2018 and wrong when we had Baker Mayfield. We felt great about Baker Mayfield over Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. I'll happily admit that one. But yeah, the data said Bryce Young slightly over C.J. Stroud last year.
Oh, great to talk to you. Have fun tomorrow. Thank you, Steve.
Yep. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus.